Here we go again, team. In this screencast, we're going to start Chapter 10 and cover sections 10.1 and 10.2. The chapter starts off with a case study that revolves around Costa Rica, an example of how conservation can work and be successful. In its past, Costa Rica has experienced widespread deforestation. The Costa Rican government and the Costa Rican people decided it was in their best interest to protect their forest, nature, and biodiversity. As a result, in Costa Rica today, more than 25% of the land is protected in nature reserves and national parks. Also, the government will pay landowners to restore forest on their land. Through these efforts, Costa Rica still harbors a great amount of biodiversity. This biodiversity is supported by a number of microclimates that create a number of habitats in different parts of the country. This is a topographic map of Costa Rica, and it shows the different types of terrain in the country and the different microclimates and different habitats that creates. Costa Rica is known for its biodiversity, making it a very popular tourist destination. The macaw parrots on the left and the capuchin monkey on the right are examples of that biodiversity. In section 10.1, we're going to discuss the major threats to forest ecosystems. Forests will vary in their age, makeup, and origins. Our untouched and undisturbed forests are called old growth or primary forest. They represent about 36% of existing forests in the world. They've been uncut or undisturbed for several hundred years, and because they're complex and mature, they are reservoirs for biodiversity. This is a photograph of old growth or primary forest in the Monteverde region of Costa Rica. In this one photograph alone, you can see the high amount of plant biodiversity that this forest contains. If an old growth or primary forest is disturbed naturally or through human activity and then comes back, it's called a second growth forest. Second growth forests are products of secondary ecological succession, where plant communities reestablish themselves after a disturbance in the presence of soil. Finally, we have tree plantations, which are also called tree farms or commercial forests. In these forests, trees are planted and harvested on a regular basis, and they may supply most industrial wood in the future. This diagram shows how tree plantations work. Trees are planted and harvested in a cycle that repeats itself in 25 to 30 years here. This is a photograph of a tree plantation. Just from the photograph, you can see that biodiversity is much lower on a tree plantation than it is in an old growth or primary forest. Pictured here is a Christmas tree plantation. Christmas trees are an average of 7 years old when they're cut and sold. Forests provide both economic and ecosystem services. The economic services that forests provide include the jobs that they create and the resources that can be bought and sold. There are 4 types of ecosystem services, and forests provide all 4. Provisioning services are the goods that an ecosystem produces or provides. In a forest, they include things like food, wood, and medicine. Regulating services include the control and regulation of ecosystem processes. In a forest, they include things like regulating climate, controlling pests, and facilitating pollination. In the photo on the left, it shows the chemical structure of Taxol, a medicine used to treat cancer derived from the Pacific yew tree. On the right, there's a mosquito, and forests can help support the predators that feed on pests like mosquitoes. Cultural services are the non-material benefits provided by an ecosystem, and forests provide spiritual, recreational, aesthetic, and educational value. Support services are the services that maintain the factors necessary for producing all the other ecosystem services. Forests support the hydrologic cycle, soil formation, nutrient cycling, and primary production. This infographic from your book provides specific examples of the ecosystem services and the economic services provided by forests. All deforestation begins with the building of roads that create access for loggers. This has the negative environmental consequence of creating habitat fragmentation, where a natural habitat is broken apart. There are three ways in which we can cut trees down. The first is called selective cutting, where intermediate age and mature trees are cut down either individually or in small groups. The second way is clear cutting, where all trees in a given area are removed. And finally, the third way is called strip cutting, where trees are clear cut, but only in strips. This diagram shows how deforestation begins with the building of roads. The roads create access, which increases the rate of deforestation. Sometimes the forests aren't allowed to grow back, and farmland and pastures take their place. This diagram shows the three different types of logging: selective cutting, clear cutting, and strip cutting. It also shows how selective cutting and strip cutting can help preserve soil, and how clear cutting can promote and even speed up soil erosion. This is a photograph of a forest that's been mostly clear cut. Fires can threaten forest ecosystems, and there are two types of forest fires to consider. The first are surface fires. These are fires that burn on the forest floor, and they usually burn leaf litter and undergrowth, leaving trees to survive. They actually provide a number of ecological benefits. Surface fires will thin out forest vegetation, reducing the severity of future fires. They also make nutrients more readily available to plants and will help control the spread of invasive species. The other type of forest fire is a crown fire. Crown fires burn extremely hot and can burn and kill entire trees. Because they spread so quickly, they also kill wildlife. And because they burn all the vegetation in an area, they can also increase soil erosion. Soil in these places can later be blown or washed away more easily. Climate change and global warming are also threatening forest ecosystems. Trees that are stressed by drought and higher average temperatures are more susceptible to disease and pest. The mountain pine beetle pictured here has decimated millions of acres of forest in Colorado and British Columbia in Canada. Another issue is that drier forests lead to more forest fires, which lead to more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This is an example of a positive feedback loop, and it's going to be harder to slow down or stop the longer we do nothing about it. In addition to wood, deforestation also occurs for the purposes of agriculture, grazing, and settlement. Deforestation has been especially pronounced in tropical forest in Latin America, Indonesia, and Africa, and boreal forest in Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. Remember that our boreal forests are our pine or coniferous forests. This is a satellite image of deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. Creating land for cattle to graze has been cited as a significant reason for Amazon deforestation. As we look at our forest around the world, there is encouraging news. In recent years, there's actually been an increase in forest cover, mostly due to reforestation efforts and tree plantations. This map shows the extent of deforestation around the world in the last 8,000 years. The frontier forest 8,000 years ago is shown in light green. Degraded forest today is shown in green, and relatively undisturbed forest today is shown in dark green. This table summarizes the negative consequences of deforestation, including increased soil erosion, increased flooding, and local extinction of species. Another positive story is the story of forest in the eastern United States. Between 1620 and 1920, forests there were decimated. In 1905, the U.S. Forest Service was established, and through their management, these forests were allowed to grow back through secondary ecological succession. Also, tree plantations have supplied much of the wood that we need. Unfortunately, we do need to consider that tree plantations are monocultures that reduce biodiversity and deplete nutrients from the soil. When trees are cut and removed, they take the nutrients with them. This is a map of where we have forests today in the contiguous United States, not including Alaska and Hawaii. Climate change is also creating drier climates in many of the places where these forests exist. People worry that the risk of larger and more frequent fires will increase. People are also worried that we're either near or past an ecological tipping point where these forests will not grow back. This photograph was taken in Bolivia, where tropical rainforest was cut down and converted into agricultural land. The causes for tropical deforestation are varied and complex. These forests have been cut down or cleared by fire for things like population growth, subsistence farming, ranching, lumber, and palm oil plantations. In section 10.2, we're going to talk about how we can manage and sustain our forests. This table lists a number of solutions in which we can use our forest more sustainably. It includes things like including the economic services that a forest provides in its economic value, reducing clear cutting, and only planting tree plantations on already deforested or degraded land. There are other solutions as well. First, we can try to use only wood that's been certified as sustainably produced. The Sustainable Forestry Initiative is one organization that does the certification. Second, we can try to use more sustainable logging practices in tropical forest. And third, we can phase out government subsidies. Subsidies are monetary incentives that a government provides to promote an industry like logging. We can improve how we manage forest fires. We can educate people on how to prevent accidental fires, like the Smokey the Bear campaign did in the United States. We can also use prescribed fires that we start and control. This will burn away any flammable material and prevent more serious, uncontrolled fires from happening in the future. We can also allow fires on public lands to burn as long as they don't harm human life or property. We can also encourage anyone that lives in or near a forest to thin down the trees or vegetation within 60 meters of any structure on their property. And finally, we can thin forests down in any fire-prone areas by removing the small trees and underbrush that are likely to burn in a fire. In order to be more sustainable, we should reduce our need for harvested trees. We should use wood more efficiently. According to some estimates, 60% of wood used in the United States is wasted. We should also look for alternatives for paper made from wood pulp. There are plants like canaf and hemp that can be used to produce paper. This is a photograph of canaf plants. Again, canaf can be used as an alternative to wood pulp for producing paper. The country of Haiti is a good example of how unsustainable deforestation can have significant environmental consequences. Trees in the country are often cut down to produce charcoal or firewood for ovens and stoves, and this has led to widespread deforestation, soil erosion, and flooding during storms. There are possible solutions that people in the country can take to avoid total ecological disaster. They can plant small tree plantations with trees that grow fast or with shrubs. They can burn wood more efficiently. They can use solar or wind-generated electricity, or they can burn garden waste as an alternative to wood. This is a photograph of the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, with Haiti on the left side and the Dominican Republic on the right side. This photograph emphasizes the extent of Haitian deforestation. There are ways for us to reduce tropical deforestation. One is a debt for nature swap, in which a government has some or all of its debt forgiven in exchange for protecting forest on its land. Another is a conservation concession, in which an outside group or organization pays a government or a landowner to protect their forest. Other ways include cracking down on illegal logging, ending subsidies, and planting trees. This table just summarizes the ways in which we can prevent deforestation and restore forest once they've been degraded.